Hey everybody, Steve Cady here with All Things Change, our podcast webinar series, and we're doing a part two today with Brian. Brian is one of those nerdy people that loves working with all kinds of technology and all kinds of geeky stuff, and then he goes a step further and he actually is a nerd of nerds, I think, around this kind of stuff. He's really into the intricacies of weaving things together and finding creative ways to make things or invent things. And in this case, we're looking at this notion of Obsidian with Zotero and how we manage content and all the stuff that we're collecting and bringing together. We did a webinar before. We'll put it in the chat that goes through all kind of, we got through Zotero into Obsidian, but we didn't get far enough. It was just way too much good stuff. So what we're going to do today is kind of gloss over the front part. You'll have part one of that to go back to if you want to see. And we're going to focus on the power of Obsidian connected and what the end results look like and various things like that. And Brian will take us through that. But before I jump in, Brian, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and also about the doctoral program and how that's serving you and what you do at BGSU in our doctoral program.
Certainly. Hello to the people I've had the opportunity to meet before and new faces. I'm Brian Heward, site director here at the Atlanta Metropolitan Campus for QTS Data Centers. Data centers, the whole industry is finally becoming known in the space because of the advancements made in AI, deep machine learning, and people are comprehending and being exposed to how data centers are shaping and forming our day-to-day lives. I have the honor of working with the best facilities operations team I've ever been a part of here in the Atlanta Metropolitan Campus. And we're just spend our day-to-day keeping everything up and running for all of our customers and neighbors and community. The thing that I truly enjoyed about the doctoral program at BGSU is it is so poignant and so impactful to our day-to-day within my space. Everything that we've covered and all the things I've learned doing the beginnings of my research has been mind-blowing and has really shown where, when an industry like data centers, who's only been around roughly 25 years, so we're hitting our teenage years, we're starting to really mature as an industry, and now we're starting to experience a lot of those same things that you see historically. And now we're also at the unique crossroads of being able to take some of that historical knowledge and learn from everyone else's lessons learned and apply it to our space. And the primary reason I feel that is so impactful is because of the way that data centers impact everyone across the globe on a day-to-day basis. So we actually have the chance to be proactive for once in an industry that is touching everyone's lives versus reactive. So learning the tool sets and learning the right mindset and learning how to communicate and think and become a thought leader is just some of the things and tools that the BGSU DODC program has really helped me with.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And one of the focuses of our programs and what we're doing is thought leadership. And at the center of thought leadership, it's creating knowledge that is in service of others. And it's making a difference while you sleep. Passive income is to make money while we sleep. This is what we're doing today here with this webinar and what we do in the doctoral program. And what the focus is of our program is building those competencies and the skills for thought leadership in service of what your passion is as we use OD and C skills. So those are skills for transforming organizations, revitalizing communities, and developing human potential. So really, how do we serve our passion to follow our passion, making that difference, and do it as a thought leader, which today, hopefully this recording will be able to help others, and people will click on the recording from last time. And while you're sleeping, somebody's watching it and learning a little bit and being able to do a little bit better at what they do. At the center of what you have found with this connection, what would you call this? What would you call this connection between, Zotero, kind of searching, finding data, managing information that's relevant content, and Zotero through Obsidian? What would you call this ecosystem, if you will?
So I really love the example that you just utilized as passive income and with thought creation and thought leadership being that, but from a knowledge perspective. This is the work that you do in investing to create that business that will help generate that passive income. The process or the framework is your workflow, right? That you work through as you're doing your research and collecting your thoughts and having your aha moments. Um, and the end product being your, work, your articles that you're hoping to have published, your dissertation work, and all the other things that go into it, is then becomes that passive knowledge income, so to speak. Right.
What
So
do you call
that's
that? What would you call that? What do you, are you seeing a word out there, this connection of this? Is it knowledge management? Is it a knowledge management platform? A personalized knowledge management platform, if you will?
so
What do you,
I look at it in my head, I think of it more of a knowledge management ecosystem.
okay,
Right. Ecosystems, are disparate software packages or, widgets or parts and pieces you put together yourself to help create the environment that best suits you to really enable and empower your thinking and your thoughtfulness. Whereas a platform would be something like a Microsoft Office package is a platform. They're designed to work together. And so it
gotcha.
makes it,
Okay,
it's more of a
yeah, that's
tool set.
cool. And what would you say, what was, when you first kind of landed on this idea of doing this, putting these things together, what were some of the emotions that you experienced as you were like uncovering what these connections? What were some of the ahas you were having? What was your reaction as you were discovering these connections? You had a moment where you go, wait a second, this kind of fits together. What happened when you discovered that?
Um, Big aha moment and a sort of a feeling of relief a little bit. I always reflect back, Steve, to the the story that you relayed to us during our first time together in September of 23, where you were talking about how y'all had just moved and you had all these boxes and boxes of paper articles and things like that. And that just it sort of like gave me a little bit of anxiety, only because that's just so much stuff to have to keep on hand and whatnot, as you're doing what we're all hoping to do from a thought leadership perspective. And then when I discovered the ecosystem, or I created my own ecosystem and workflows for me, it has allowed me to be way more efficient and digest way more information and actually have it be more productive. So it was a huge sense of relief and a little bit of excitement, to be honest. Right.
Yeah, and
So
what he's referring to is when I finished my doctorate and I moved up here from Florida, I was at Florida State. When I moved up and I'm teaching at BGSU, um, my library consisted of a lot of boxes with those paper boxes with folders in them that you kind of keep track of stuff. And I had literally a 15 by 15-foot room full up to maybe 4 feet high of
Hmm.
boxes and books. And if I had this article that was really good, it was in one spot, in one box, in a folder, but I might use that article for 10 different things. And it's related to this book and it's related to this thing over here and this other stuff there and these notes I took there. And so I would have to remember where it was. And then I would have to go find it in those boxes. And then I had to store all of it into a shed, not a shed, one of those rental spaces, which got destroyed by water, and it just destroyed literally almost all my stuff that I was keeping in there. It was a bit freeing, to be honest with you.
I can imagine.
Because I have it all, but I don't know where to find it all, right? And that's what he's referring to when I described that. It made you have a lot of anxiety. Well, the
Yes.
world has changed, right? We now have this way of putting together these platforms into an ecosystem that can help us manage information that serves us as we are knowledge creators. Because everybody that's here today, I would say, is someone who wants to be able to utilize knowledge in their subject matter expertise and potentially in their thought leadership. Subject matter experts are people who use information really well in nimble ways to solve problems. Thought leaders go one step further. They take all of that solutioning and solving problems that they've done and start creating new knowledge, new scalable solutions, things that they find work, and they share that through written word and mixed media. So that's sort of the next phase, of that. And this can serve both subject matter experts and thought leadership. So Brian, you want to take us through, kind of take us what you'd like to share with us today?
Sure. I'm going to share my screen here as soon as Lisa gives me the permissions to. And what we'll do is
maybe you have to. Sorry, Dave, I think you have to.
You currently don't have screen share permission, Brian?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay, let's fix that. Sorry about that.
As well as Tio's hooking me up, we're gonna just spend maybe 1 or 2 minutes just doing a brief overview of my ecosystem, just so that everyone has a frame of reference. And then we'll just jump right into Obsidian and how I use it and how I find it useful. And Tio, thank you so much, sir. You're on the ball as always. So what we're going to do is just do a straight screen share so I can jump back and forth. I apologize, y'all. I'm don't use Zoom all that often, so I am just having to reorient myself to it real quick. Anywho, so we can all see my flow chart here, yes?
Yep.
Perfect. All right, so this is my ecosystem. Like I mentioned, quick run through. I have my research question or idea, and I look for or I investigate the literature and the resources that are available out there there's a wide variety of tools, Web of Science, Research Rabbit, Consensus, and others. And once I get my bulk of my raw material, so to speak, I start consuming that information, collecting it, ingesting the resources, and then digesting that information and doing the annotation, my initial round of annotation in Zotero. Like Dr. Katie mentioned, there's a part 1 where we talk about Zotero a lot more in depth, and I highly encourage everyone to go check that out. From there is where we hit Obsidian, right? And I actually have a suite of tools that I use along with Obsidian, but we'll concentrate on Obsidian as your second brain. The second brain is a concept that says that you have so much information that's external to the things that we have to deal with day to day. You have to have a way to file it a way to make it easily accessible, right? And that's the key part, is making sure that information is easily accessible so that, going back to Dr. Katie's anecdote about having, you store it that then got damaged by water and you have a special set aside thing. That ability to easily reference and go find some of that material is really the magic behind Obsidian, and how you can utilize it to summarize, store, and then also construct your thoughts. So there's that. Any questions around the ecosystem piece of it before we go into Obsidian? Awesome. So
I'm sorry, maybe a little bit on the front end where you got this research question or idea, and kind of set the stage as it flows into the Research Rabbit to Zotero. Just maybe 3 minutes on that kind of flow.
Okay. So I'll utilize the example of some work that we were doing in hopes of being published, right? So I had a research question around the organizational development and organizational structure for the data center industry. So I had a thought around using socio-technical systems and how that could be applied to my space. I went into these variety of search engines and search tools. Some of these are AI driven. Some of these are partially driven with deep machine learning and AI. And then there's also just some of the traditional methodologies of using Boolean searches and things like that. Get all those together. And what I do is, so I just switched over to my Zotero library. So as you can see here, I have a bunch of subfolders that have different.
We can't see, we can't see.
Oh,
No, it's not there.
You gotta do
sorry.
the, if you, Brian, if you do the share screen advanced and then the share a box.
ah,
Then you pick the box will, whatever's in it will show.
Share portion.
I appreciate that. Let's see here. How's that work for everybody?
That's within the Zotero?
Yes.
Ah,
So
Okay.
right now, if y'all are able to see my screen, you're able to see my Zotero, where it says my library on the left-hand side, and a bunch of subcategories where I've categorized the different things that I've been digging into.
One question there. I know Zotero wasn't the topic today. Is AV, like video, audio, interview information, is it also can it be hosted in Zotero
Yes.
and used for that? Okay, great. Thank you.
100%. And so, with Zotero here, and what we'll do is let's go to this article right here. So this is an article written by Mr. Trist on socio-technical systems. If I remember correctly, this was in 1959. Yep, 1959. So what you do is you upload your article into here, or your portion of a book or any other type of material. And you have that capability to highlight. And I want y'all to put that in the back of y'all's mind for just a moment. We're going to come back to how key this highlighting can be when you're tying things back to Zotero. And you'll see there's a wide variety of colors that you have available here, yellow, red, and all these things. And as you're reading it, you treat it just like we all would, maybe back in high school, where you have a book or a piece of paper and you're reading it and you highlight things that are just interesting to you. And that's literally what I utilize Zotero for, is that initial annotation as well as storage and management. We'll get to the end part with Zotero, then comes back in and becomes really important when you're doing your final assembly of your article for inline citations and also bibliography creation. Was there anything else you wanted me to touch on with Zotero, Dr. Katie?
No, I think just making sure people kind of, the example sets them up for then what happens next, because they can kind of picture
Yes.
what you just talked about here. So that's really good.
Perfect. So we'll stick with that same article that we mentioned. So here is my Obsidian. This is my live Obsidian vault. So in Obsidian, we don't call them folders. We call each standalone database a vault. You can have multiple vaults that tie into the same Obsidian shell. So the main thing that I would like everyone to keep in mind is Obsidian is very much like what Windows 3.1, Windows 3.2 was way back in the late 80s, early 90s when it first came out. For all of y'all old people like myself, we remember when you had a computer, it actually came with DOS, which was very much a text-driven command line, command prompt system. And the thing that made Windows so spectacular was it introduced a single pane of glass GUI, or guided graphical user interface layer on top of it. That's exactly what this is. This is just a shell where you can set up different things, which we call plugins, right? Core and community plugins, and we'll touch upon that here in a few minutes. That allow you to add to the functionality or customize the functionality of Obsidian for your own utilization. There are a lot of different ones out there and so many different things. And you might be asking yourself, well, what does a plugin even allow me to do? So we're going to just jump right into it. And I want to run an example for y'all of how I have Obsidian and Zotero tied into each other. So I'm just going to actually hit a hotkey I have pre-programmed. And for me, it's Control Z. And you see this box right here that says awaiting item selection from Zotero. When I go over my Zotero search bar pops up, and we're gonna go reference that 1959 paper from Mr. Trist, and just hit enter. It's fetching all the things, and it doesn't look like it did much until you come down here and click here. So what this has done is, for me and my workflow, this has created the very first important step, my card in my card catalog. This becomes the core of my reference for this particular article. So here it's stripped out the title, the authors, if that's available, the site key, which is the reference key, and then it also has all the metadata. This particular article, since it was actually issued during our lecture, during a presentation, doesn't have an abstract. But here's the citation information. And the really neat part is all these things right here, right? What you're seeing here, and let's make it a little bit more presentable. What you're seeing here is all those different highlights that you saw. Depending on the color they were highlighted, it automatically sorts them into one of 8 different categories. So for me, it's general information, and then supplemental information, examples and case studies, key points, supporting information, so on and so forth. So what this allows me to do is to go through, read my article, and just naturally read it so I can make sure to ingest it like I normally would when I'm reading something with a highlighter in hand. And then I can then, after the fact, instead of having to then go back, reread it, and try and sort everything out manually, I just hit this button and it does this initial sort for me.
Question.
Yes.
Those categories, are they correlated with your color coding in the highlighting?
Yes, sir,
Okay.
they are. And
Okay.
I was just about to get to that. I'm glad you brought that up. So here, and this is the other thing about Obsidian that is both good and challenging at the same time. Obsidian is very much what you put into it is what you'll get out of it. To maybe a better comparison would be if the comparison between Apple and an Android operating system for your phone, right? There's a lot of great things about the Apple operating system. It's very much very easy to use, very user-friendly, but they also have it really locked down. What you get is what you get. You have very little capability to customize it. Whereas with the Android system on your phone, you can highly customize it. You can go into the settings and change all types of things, and it gives you a lot of leeway. It just requires a little bit more setup on the front end. I say all that to answer your, hopefully better answer your question. Here you can see my red highlight is key points, my orange primary, so on and so forth. I can also go in and change these if I want to. And then that change will then impact everything I use after that change. Does that make sense? Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Perfect. So that's that first step. The next thing I do is, and I'm going to jump up into my actual database to sort of hit some of this other thing. So it's gonna be a little real world. So don't judge me for it too much. This is how my brain works, and this is how I've designed my ecosystem for myself. So as you can see, first off, we're going to go into here, which is my actual notations. I moved these up here so that I could do that example for you and how Zotero works. So here's my real operating one, all the same highlights and things like that. What I do is I take this and I sit down and I code it, right? So recently we just learned about thematic analysis and you know how that first layer of coding can really help compartmentalize the information you're looking at. So what I did is I take the stuff that we get here from the initial highlighting, and I actually then go through and put the initial coding that you'll see represented here with initial, and then it's hit on the same category as that statement, right? So initial general information, initial key points. And I take that coding and I create a second reference for here that puts that coding in place. I do that for the entire reference material, and then I take a break from it. I've ingested it. Now what I'm doing is I'm digesting it. I'll set it down, and then I'll actually create a summary of what that entire article is, right? Including key points and things of that nature. And sometimes these summaries are really quick, and sometimes they're a little bit long. And so that's sort of the three-legged tripod that I utilize in Obsidian. Now, back to some of the technical capability of Obsidian. You'll see both here and in the coding piece. I'm sorry, I don't have it in this particular coding piece. There's this backlink is what we call it. It's just like an internal hyperlink. You hover over it, and then you can reference. It automatically shoots you back to your reading notes. So, if you're reading something and you're like, oh, wow, open versus closed systems, let me click here, and you can actually just glance through all your different highlights and reference from the actual article itself. We'll pause there. I just went through a whole bunch, and I'm sure people are either have a bunch of questions or just don't know 100%. Yes, sir.
I didn't know I was the only one with the raised hand. How long did it take you? How much upfront work did you do to design the system and the workflow? Did you have that? Because there's an architecture, there's a flow, you got to know what you're looking for. Yeah. Can you give an idea of that?
Yes, sir. It's such a great question. I probably went through about 4 different iterations. And by the way, after the first time of just playing around with the software packages, I realized I'd put the cart before the horse. And Tio's heard me say this ad nauseum. And Otis actually has some experience with me on this too. I put away the computer, and I went to the whiteboard, right? Everything is predicated off the workflow that actually works for you. There's so many great software packages and so many different tools out there, but we all know, unless you know what you're trying to accomplish, the tools are almost more of a hindrance than a help. So I highly encourage everybody, the first place to start when you're trying to figure out your ecosystem, figure out your workflow, do the whiteboard work, boxes and a marker. That's all it takes. And then from there, I finally got frustrated enough, reminded myself of my own advice to my team members. So after the 3rd iteration, I stopped, put it all away, erased my whiteboard, started from scratch. And that's how I came up with this workflow that I've been working with for roughly 9 months.
Great. Thank you.
I appreciate the question. Are there any other questions? Okay. The next step that I do, and I'm going to tell on myself a little bit here, y'all. So this summary is actually not something that I author myself. This summary is where I utilize, let's go back to my flow, right here in the second brain piece, you'll see that there's ChatGPT and Gemini listed. I am a huge believer in welcoming new technology into my life and seeing how I can make it work for me. And this is how I make it work for me. I take that actual raw article in pieces and parts, depending on how I feel that the information I need is, and I will copy and paste it or just drop the PDF directly into ChatGPT and say, please summarize the key points of this article. And I actually did an experiment. Dr. Brooks, during Dr. Brooks's class, Tia, when was that class? In spring, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, just this past spring.
Right. And I was talking about my cohort with this, and Dr. Brooks was in the room and she was interested. So we actually took an article that she wrote, we downloaded it straight off the internet, dropped it right into Zotero, not my apologies, not Zotero, but ChatGPT, and said, please summarize and create a summary with key points. And it did it right there in front of us. And I asked Dr. Brooks, read through this. Does it seem accurate? And she's like, this is very, very accurate. So the thing I mentioned to my cohort at the time, and the thing that I will always mention to anyone who's willing to listen. ChatGPT, Bard, Gemini, all these are great technologies to bolster our knowledge, not create or not do the job for us initially. You still have to ingest the article first. You still have to read it yourself. You still have to do the work. Everything else is just to help bolster that. So from a learning scaffolding standpoint, to me, this summary that ChatGPT creates is it's using the words, creating different words to say the same thing to help lock that information into my head, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. And then from there, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I put it down and I come back to it in a day or two and do my real thematic analysis. And that's where you see all these secondary tags over here. And this is where Obsidian once again becomes truly helpful. So as you see right here is all the tags that I have in my research so far. Anything that's in my initial category is that initial sorting that we've discussed. So in the roughly right now, I think in this particular vault, there's 12 or 14 articles. I have 332 initial tags. And then even some that I've disagreed on people with. That's really neat. And then from there, I do my real thematic stuff where I say, okay, all the things here I think are related to open systems. So you click on that and all of a sudden you can, go there. And all those things are in this one particular vault. Let's see if we can pick something that's not in there. So here on the things that I've disagreed with, I want to do that again and walk everyone through it. So we go to initial or whatever tag category you're looking for and, go to what you're interested in. You come over here to on this side, and what this has done, right? This plugin, what it's done is it's taken all the tags that you have in your vault and automatically makes it so every individual note that tag exists in is now accessible right here. So here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different articles. It contained the tag for vocabulary, concept of organizational ecology. Wanted to make sure that I had a really good reference for what that vocabulary, that terminology is in the literature. Here in this particular article, right, Kuhn used the word paradigm to represent universal recognized scientific achievements. I thought that was really neat to have a formal reference for how the literature defines paradigm for this particular thing, so on and so forth, right? So this is where, to me, Obsidian becomes truly powerful. I can read an article, code it, and then come back to it a year later because something has tickled the back of my head, or I'm working on something else and I'm naturally curious, do I have anything in my library that's already touched upon this? And I can go and say, okay, yeah, networks, right? Sure. Interconnection. I'm doing some research on interconnection right now. Oh, that's right. A year ago, I read this article and here's the thing around the interconnection piece. Right. So that's where Obsidian stops becoming just a storage facility and actually starts becoming your second brain. And I'll pause there in case anyone has any questions or comments around things. Yes, Otis.
So I'm just curious, like, would you be able to use this for, like, let's say you wrote your own paper on surviving and thriving in the VUCA environment or something like that, and you have a series of papers that you're trying to collect your own thoughts and kind of understand, like, hey, what am I doing with these series of works that I've produced? Could you use that to kind of organize your own thoughts toward
100%.
Yeah, okay.
100%.
What would that look like?
That is a really good question. Let's see here. So, like for me, right, Otis is familiar. He's unfortunately, I've trapped him in an office before and talked to him about my area of interests. So for me, it looks just like this. Here's the article I'm attempting to write, and here's, the first revision, here's my second revision. And that's just how my brain works. I like having things categorized. I like having a second revision piece here in case I realize there was something in that first revision that works better. But the thing to keep in mind is Obsidian is whatever you want it to be. You just have to have your formal workflow out first.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers your question, Otis.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
What about book references? Now, it seems like you've got a great set of articles and we can get through that, but you can't really ingest books, or maybe you can. So
You can.
that's what I'm curious about.
That's another great question. So we're actually going to go back to Zotero for a moment. And what you'll see is these different sets of icons here, right? These icons actually all mean something. So this here is a PDF or a grab from a website, right? So this was a break in the cloud and the local socio-technical effect. Here was some important, this is an actual just snapshot from a website, right? And now I double clicked on it and now it's going to try and load it. My apologies. But to your point around books, the book is available as a reference as well. Now, here's where it gets a little sticky. If you have an electronic copy of the book in a PDF form, you can add it here all day long, and then do the highlighting and things like that. Tio and Dr. Katie both were the unfortunate victims of my geekiness during our last time together a few months ago. I had just bought a device that actually lets you scan books, because that's how far into the rabbit hole I've gone on this. And I'll give you an example. There's a book written by Catcham and Trist from '92 called "Not All Teams Are Created Equal," and I bought the book on thrift on a website. It came in the mail. I scanned it in my device. This PDF was created, and now I'm off to the races utilizing my original workflow. So that's how books would tie into this process.
Hey, Brian, can books from Kindle or other places be brought in? Digital books?
So Kindle is a unique situation because of the copyrights that they have with the publishers. You cannot pull Kindle or that format into Zotero. Zotero does work with a few other formats, but I have found that those formats have their own pros and cons. And for me, the PDF is the easiest way. So I've stuck with PDFs for that particular reason.
Is there a workaround?
There is one. It wasn't one that I have familiarized with myself with on a granular level, but I do know that there are some plugins in Obsidian that give you the workaround.
Okay, gotcha.
Question on that also, again, on the book side. If you capture screenshots from your Kindle, will it do the OCR and kind of suck the stuff in there as well? Is that possible?
So, it is possible, though that is going to be done before you touch Zotero in the workflow. Like if we were to mirror my workflow, before you got to this place right here, it would actually fall more of an in-between.
Okay.
So that would be highly dependent on how you're screenshotting or how you're capturing, how you're converting to PDF, or are you doing an OCR so it's searchable, and things of that nature. More than happy to continue the conversation after our time together today. If anyone has a particular instance or a particular technology problem they're trying to solution.
I'm going to suggest, Ryan and Brian, that you guys ought to connect anyways, because I think you have some like-minded interests in this stuff. You guys ought to talk.
Ah, spectacular.
Connection sent.
So there is something else within Obsidian that I want to touch upon, though we're not going to delve too deep into it because it can become a series of rabbit holes and our time is growing short. What y'all have heard me reference a few times is plugins. When you go to Obsidian and you initially download Obsidian, right, what you actually have, and what we'll do is we'll actually create a new vault just for the sake of walking you through this. Let's stick the vault. There. All right, so we have just created a new vault. This is, you know, the moment that you first into your new vault, this is what you see. So as you can see, it actually looks completely different than the thing that we've been working with to date. That's because Obsidian and people who like stuff like this, us nerdy type of people, tend to really enjoy customization and making things work for us. So the first thing I do is I actually go and set it to dark because my eyes, it's just easier on me to have it set to a dark theme. But more importantly, there's these things called plugins. And when you go to Obsidian, there's two separate menus. There's core plugins that come automatically with the shell of Obsidian. And all these are day one. You might have to come in here and turn some on or off depending on what your utilization of Obsidian is going to be. And then once you do all that, the real fun and the real power behind Obsidian comes into the community plugins. Okay, and I want to encourage everyone, should you decide to play around with Obsidian, when you go, before you turn on community plugins, please, please, please read this disclaimer right here, because Obsidian and the plugins are all open source, right? Which means that there's the potential for some bad actor to come in and do something with your software, your computer, or something like that. So there's an element of risk. That's why I wanted to touch upon that. It's all community. It's all, 15 years ago, we would have called it shareware. So just wanted to make sure everyone was aware. So read this plugin or read this disclaimers about community plugins. And if you're comfortable with it, go ahead and turn them on. And once you turn those on, what you have access to is right now 1,671 different plugins that different people have created because they saw a problem or they saw where Obsidian could be a solution to a particular issue that they were dealing with. And there's so many different ones in here. We're going to concentrate on just a few. So the thing that really makes Obsidian work with Zotero is called the Zotero integration plugin. So you go in here, you click on it. It's as easy as hitting install and enable. Right now I can communicate once I set it up with where I want my particular links to go and things like that. And that's what a plugin does for you. Data view is another one that I like to utilize. This helps Obsidian become more of a database tool set, and it really does a lot with sorting and things like that based off commands. And Templater, there's just so many good ones in here. You'll have to spend some time exploring yourself. These plugins are what really allow you to hone your workflow to work for you. It's once again, the customizability really is what makes Obsidian such a very strong tool. And we'll pause there for any questions or anything like that.
Brian, Miguel had posted a question in the chat. How much has this improved your systemic view of your work by using Obsidian?
Tremendously. Tremendous. And I know that sounds almost like a self-serving comment, but once I got used to my workflow, what I was able to do from locating a resource to putting it into Obsidian to utilizing it in the final form, it's cut down that time frame tremendously. I'm way more efficient in the nuts and bolts of the research process, and it gives me more time to actually, digest the information and fit it into how I think it makes sense, for my research. Yes, Nicholas.
Hi. I am before kind of getting some general information from your last chat and with today, without any really prior knowledge or experience in this sort of thing, would you recommend like gaining confidence in Zotero first and then kind of building it sequentially, or do it to get like, how would you suggest if I'm new to this, what process would you recommend in terms of going from right now to, hey, I can hop on and use this with confidence?
Such a
Brian,
great question.
can I make a comment on that as somebody who's like
Definitely.
watched you as this and as a so Brian, full disclosure, Brian and I are on the same in the same cohort 5. And as we are getting started with doing research, everybody's like, well, how are you using Zotero? How are you, using something else? How are you finding your research? And so my suggestion, and Brian, I'll let you correct that or reframe that, but my thinking is that right now I have not adapted Brian's approach yet. I want to. And I feel like, okay, I need to get with him to sort that through a little bit more and get it set up on my machine. But what I am doing is like in Zotero, I'm starting to think in terms of to me, the key piece is so he's highlighting certain things so that you can come back to an article and find it again, right? In some of my earlier writing, a lot of it's like, shoot, where was that quote again? I know I saw that, which, so like that thing, shuffling through paper or digitally scrolling through, where was that again that I highlighted? So I'm starting to think in terms of like, how do I want to highlight this fact as I'm reading? And so I am in Zotero, but I'm thinking about, is this something I want to come back to as a key insight or as a connected to something else, and sort of trying to figure out what is my color coding system going to be so that once I get with Brian, maybe that I can leverage that what is already there.
No, Tio, you're spot on, right? I mean, I've seen people who actually had one whole color of highlighting in Zotero dedicated to. I don't know why this is important, but this seems important, and I don't want to forget it, right? Like a breadcrumb, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the glory of it. The workflow is your workflow. Nicholas, to answer your question and to build upon what Tio has mentioned, it's going to almost seem like a cop out of touch, but it depends on your level of comfortability with software and technology. For me, I have a higher level of comfortability than some. So just like actually when I research, and I hate saying this in front of Dr. Katie, so please don't judge me too much, Dr. Katie, but I'll have like a 30-page article in front of me to read. I'll get through half of it and I need to take a break from it, but I still have the energy to research. So I'll actually shift to a different article that's almost completely different, and it sort of re-energizes. And I'll flop back and forth like that until I have both of them done and digested. I take that same approach with software. Zotero was so powerful, and I was doing things in Zotero before I discovered Obsidian. Once I discovered Obsidian, by another cohort member of Tio's and I's, Frank's, he was the first person to even mention it to me. And I started playing around in Obsidian. I realized I had to go back and erase everything that I'd done in Zotero because of how I wanted to utilize Obsidian. Right. So knowing that I was going to work with them together, for me, it worked best discovering both of them at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. I know we got about 5 minutes left. I stopped my screen share because I miss seeing everybody. Love the questions. Keep them coming. Anything I can do to be helpful, please.
So is there a list of sources, videos, or anything that people can, when they want to get started, where would you recommend people go to sort of self teach, DIY this?
You know what? I'm so glad you asked Dr. Katie. And what I'll do is I actually have some resources on YouTube saved. I can send send out to be distributed to everyone who participated and add into whatever links might be added after the fact if that works. YouTube is become a really great resource for Obsidian. There are so many different people who have gone further down the rabbit hole than me on Obsidian, and it's almost I highly recommend anyone who's thinking about exploring this, play around with Obsidian, if only for 5 or 10 minutes yourself. Remember, you can't break it, right? The worst thing you'll have to do is reinstall it, right? So you're not going to hurt anything. Play around with it, get oriented a little bit, and then just start watching some general videos on it. Reach out to me. Feel free. I got no worries with that. And if I don't know an answer, I'm more than happy to help you find the right reference point for hopefully what that answer would be.
Cool. So let's just check out with the last minute we have. Ryan, what's one of your takeaways?
Oh, this really turned on the light for me because I've been looking for a way to organize resources and do a workflow for the book project I'm working on. So I'm so happy I came, and it's really gave me a good idea to how to structure, and maybe someone whose shoulder I can tap on for a little bit of help. So awesome.
Right. Lisa, how about you?
All very similar as far as just thinking of things that I want for my own professional development, like keeping that organized, but also I'm even thinking of some of my work that just there's just a lot of different resources, and I'm trying to navigate a new position where everything is. So I'm thinking it could be helpful there.
Awesome. Teo, how about you?
For me, it's just a reminder that I need to get back to reading more articles for my dissertation and the research that I want to move forward. And that probably this is a very good time to connect into this. So I've full disclosure, I've been in Zotero, and like I just described, I'm thinking about like how do I highlight this so that I can maybe make this transition and leverage some of the opportunities that Brian has uncovered here. And lots more reading to do, but looking forward to being able to do that with sort of the support and structure of being able to go back and yeah, here's where that was, rather than shoot, where was that quote? Which article was that in?
Yeah. Nick, how about you?
I just really appreciate this session, and for the first time, as I'm mentally gearing up for, starting this program, I've begun to reframe all of this in terms of building capacity, not just to complete the program, but to really build an identity as a thought leader and what that means beyond, my time at BGSU. So awesome job, Brian. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And I'm going to steal that thought, right? You just put into such good words. What I've been trying to do is build my library for the future, not just for the short or medium term.
Miguel, I know you may not be able to say anything. Wanted to see if you wanted to pipe in.
And he did it in the chat. So daily
awesome.
habits, he said, my takeaway daily habits on the process shown by Brian is a very productive approach. Thank you.
Cool. And Otis, how about you?
I'm really glad to have been a part of this for 2 reasons. I've been kicking around a book idea, but I've, just really struggled with how to organize it. So I think that can be extremely helpful. And then my best friend at University of Chicago is working on his PhD. And I know this has been a huge source of pain for him is, how does he organize all the things that he's trying to cite through his dissertation. So Dr. Katie, will you be sharing the link to this to watch on demand? Because I definitely need to make sure I get that.
We have just go to Nexus for Change. Mm-hmm. You'll see the playlist. We have it as a podcast as well. So you can get the podcasts, the webinars, the recordings, all of that stuff on the nexusforchange.com website.
And the link for the first video that for the first session, rather, that the video for the first session is in the chat. I'll see if I can drop it back in here again. But if you want to share that you know, that'll get you to the channel that also will, as soon as it's ready, have the upload for this next one.
Thank you so
So-
much. I've already saved that.
Cool.
You did? Okay, good.
Well, Brian, high five. Nice job. Have a great rest of the day today and this weekend. Thanks everybody for coming, and from our team here, which I'm getting choked up because I love them so much. But, Lisa, thanks for all your production work and support, and Teo, all the leadership and what you provide. And Brian, thanks for your thought leadership that you shared with us today. Have a great weekend. Enjoy it. Enjoy the weather. Enjoy
Take care, everybody. See y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye.